welcome to Peaky Boardgamer. My name is Res Arcana. Tonight, 4 mages are fighting against each other using their essences to invoke monsters and dragons. Who's gonna prove to be the strongest? Res Arcana is a game for 2 to 4 players designed by Lehmann and takes about an hour to finish. In our video, we're gonna learn how this game is played. Let's start. At first, place the 5 places of power in the middle of the table. These cards are double-sided, and it is advised that in your first place you use the side that depicts this symbol. In later games you may choose any combination of card sides. Below the places of power, place the 8 magic items. Below the items, place the tray with the 5 different essences. The number of these essences is not limited. Placing one of the essences on top of one of these tokens means that you have 5 items of this essence. Then shuffle the blue monument cards and create a stack, and then from the top of the stack set out 2 of them facing upwards. Select a player at random to be the first player and give that player this token. Then give all players 1 essence of each type. Shuffle the brown artifact cards and deal each player 8 cards. Then shuffle the green mage cards and deal each player 2 cards. The rest mage and artifact cards are not used and returned back in the box. Players then may examine all of their cards, but when they're done, they have to shuffle their artifact cards and create a draw pile, out of which they will draw 3 cards to be their starting hand. Now that players know their starting hand, they have to choose one of the 2 mage cards and return the other one back in the box. The mage card is placed revealed in the middle of their play area, while their hand is kept secret at all times. For your first games, instead of the random starting hand, you may choose to give players a preset 3-card starting hand. You may distinguish these cards from the number in the bottom right corner. As a final step, starting with the last player and in counterclockwise direction, players choose one of the magic items and bring it to their play area. The game is actually a race to 10 victory points. Players are trying to create a fast engine tableau in order to gain the essences they need to acquire components which grant victory points. At the end of each game round, victory is checked, so if a player has acquired 10 or more victory points, the game ends and the player with the most victory points wins the game. The game is played over rounds, and each round has 3 phases. Phase 1 collect essences, Phase 2 action phase, and phase 3 the check victory phase. Before starting explaining the phases of the game, I will share some information regarding the components of the game. Places of power, monuments, artifacts, mages and items are all referred in the game as components. In the bottom part of some of these components, we see victory point values. Most of components have a fixed victory point value, but as we can see here, and as it happens in most places of power components, the victory point value is variable. For example, the Sacred Grove's victory point value will be equal to 2 victory points plus another one for each life essence that remains on top of the card. So yes, many components can hold essences on top of them. In the top left corner of places of power, monuments and artifacts, we see a cost in essences for the component to be acquired. For artifacts, this is the cost to be played from the player's hand. Some artifacts depict this or this symbol, which classifies the artifact as dragon or creature. Now, on the components, we might see collection abilities indicated by this symbol, which are used in the collection phase of each round. Apart from collection abilities, all components have 1 or more powers depicted. These powers are mostly used in the second phase of each round, which is the action phase. A very important last thing is that all components can be straightened, as I show you here now, or be turned. For as long as a component is turned, the player may not use the power any longer. Exception to this rule are these yellow arrows on powers, which are called reactions. Reactions may be used even if the component is turned. In the Collect Essences phase, all players perform the collect abilities of their components in their tableaus, and this can be done simultaneously for all players. However, if there is any timing conflict, players may choose to do this clockwise, starting always from the first player. I have created a hypothetical player's tableau in order to explain various collection abilities. This magic item grants the player either a calm or Elan essence. This is taken from the supply and it is added in the player's personal pool of essences. Essences that are on top of the player's components are not part of the player's pool. Likewise, the Witch Mage grants the player either a life or a death essence. The Corrupt Altar artifact grants the player both a life and a death essence. Some collectabilities are conditional. For example, the Vault here says that if there is any gold essence left on top of this component, then the player can gain 2 essences of any type that cannot be gold. Yes, that grey pentagon is the symbol of any essence. The player can pick different or even same essences, but not gold, as it's depicted here. Finally, there are some collectabilities that work negatively. For example, the Cursed Forge requires from the player to pay 1 death essence, otherwise the player would have to turn this component. Finally, during the collect phase, players may take all essences from on top of any one or more of the player's components and bring them to their personal pool of essences. Important, they have to take all of the essences from one component and not part of them. Of course, taking the essences from on top of the Cursed Forge will have an impact on the victory point value of this component. In the action phase, players take turns starting with the first player and then going clockwise. On their turn, players must either perform one action or pass. If players pass, they are out of the phase completely and they cannot re-enter. When all players have passed, it's the end of the action phase. Now let's explain the possible actions a player may perform during this phase. One action is to play an artifact from the player's hand to their tableau by paying the cost indicated here. Now it's 1 gold and any 1 essence that must be paid from the player's personal pool of essences. Then the artifact is added to the tableau. Another action is to acquire either a place of power or a monument, again by paying the cost in the top left corner of the card. All monuments cost 4 gold essences. When the player decides to acquire a monument, they may also choose to acquire the top card from the stack. If, however, the player decides to take one of these monuments, the empty space is immediately replenished from the stack. If the player acquires a place of power, again it's picked and brought into the player's area. Once acquired, places of power and monuments may not be stolen from other players. Another action is to discard an artifact from the player's hand in order to gain either 1 gold essence or any 2 other essences. The player adds these essences to the personal pool of essences, and then the discarded card should be placed beneath the stack of artifacts like that. Another action players may perform during their turn is to use a power depicted in any one of their components in their tableau, as long as this component is straightened and not turned. The game has many cards with all sorts of powers. I cannot explain each card separately, but I will share information mainly about iconography and symbols, so you know how to start. Again, here we have a hypothetical player's tableau in order to explain some of the powers. All powers depict an arrow. To the left of this arrow, we see a cost that needs to be covered in order to execute the power. To the right of this arrow, we see what the player gains after this power is performed. A very common symbol as a cost is this one here. This means that the specific component must turn sideways. Remember that we cannot execute powers in turned components. Let's start with easy ones first. The Dwarven Pickaxe requires to be turned and also that the player pays 1 Elan essence in order to gain a gold essence. All essence costs have to be paid from the player's personal pool of essences, and all gained essences also have to be placed there unless otherwise specified. The research item requires to be turned and also that the player pays any 1 essence in order to draw the top card from his stack of artifacts. The Witch Mage requires to be turned and that the player pays any 2 essences, and then the player may straighten any turned component. So the player could straighten this one, for example. The top power in the Tree of Life grants the player 3 life essences and all other players also gain 1 life essence. The Oracle Monument enables the player to draw, check and reorder the top 3 cards of either his artifact stack or the Monuments deck. Take a look at the Dragon Egg power. It says destroy this component, and when we destroy components, we remove them from the game. If the power says discard an artifact, it simply means that the player has to discard one of the cards in his hand as normal beneath his stack. Well, this card enables the player to place any dragon type card from hand at a reduced cost, at the indicated cost minus any 4 essences. Of course, that will destroy the Dragon Egg. All dragons have the power to target all rivals, and all targeted players have to lose the indicated amount of life essences. For each life essence players cannot pay, they need to pay 2 other essences. Important! Again, players that have already passed from the action phase cannot be targeted from such an attack. Also, all of these powers give the other players a way to ignore the attack. In this example, targeted players may choose to pay 1 death essence and ignore the attack of the dragon. If the player of our example were attacked from another player with such an attack, then that player could use the reaction power of his god dog to ignore the attack. This reaction requires that this component is turned. We said earlier that reactions may be used even when they are turned, so the player could also use the second power of the Tree of Life to ignore the attack by paying 1 life essence. However, reaction powers that also require the turning of the component cannot be used if that component is already turned. The top power of the guard dog, however, enables the player to spend 1 Elan essence and then straighten this component. This way, the player may use this reaction again in the future. The Trend power enables the player to gain Elan essences equal to the number of death essences in any one rival's pool. Important! This power may target also players that have already passed. A very interesting power is that one on the Coral Castle. The player can turn this component and check victory immediately. Finally, the Golden Statue Monument has a reaction to checking victory. Whenever victory is checked, either at the end of a round or from a Coral Castle power, if the golden statue is straightened and the owner has 3 gold essences to spend, then that card grants the player 3 additional victory points for this specific check. Finally, when players cannot or do not wish to perform any more actions, they have to perform the pass action. The first player that passes takes the first player token and flips it to the other side. It should be noted that this token is worth 1 victory point. Secondly, the player swaps his magic item with another one from the middle of the board and then flips it to the other side. Thirdly, the player draws 1 artifact from his stack and adds it to his hand. Whenever players need to draw cards from their stack and the stack is empty, they reshuffle the discards to create a new stack. Then they resume drawing cards. When all players have passed, we move to the check victory phase. In this phase, players simply check their tableaus to find out if any player has reached or exceeded 10 victory points. If that's the case, then the game is over and that player is the winner. In case there is a tie, then the winner is the tied player that has the most essences in their pool of essences, counting gold as 2 essences, so I would have 5 essences. If the tie still exists, then all tied players share their victory. If there is no winner, however, all players flip the magic item and straighten all turned components in their tableau. The player who has the first player token flips it over and a new round begins. And that was the video for Res Arcana, a truly amazing game that I really enjoy when I play it in 2 players mode. That was the video for today, and if you like our video and want to see more, please subscribe to my channel, and until next time, have fun and play more board games.